Most of us who have iPhones or Droids have used emojis, those computer-generated images we send as part of our text messages, tweets, or other social media postings. But maybe what emojis you use or how often you use them says something about you. Dr. Robert Caudill is an associate professor of psychiatry and also treats patients as part of UofL Physicians. And we're going to talk about emojis. Dr. Caudill, welcome.
Thanks, Mark. So emojis are basically something that grew out of emoticons, and that was the assembly of standard typewriter type of elements that were assembled into facial features, things like smiley faces, frowny faces. Japanese tech firms kind of built on that and gave us a lot more nuance. But really the whole effort of all of these things is to fill in for some of the missing pieces in text transmission, text communication that just don't quite capture what we can do in speech.
Right. Well, I use Twitter a lot,
Sure.
so I use the smiley face and those kinds of things on Twitter. Why do you think people use these, and who uses emoticons and emojis, and why do they use them?
Well, I think people who really want to communicate the fullest context and meaning of their ideas are going to be drawn to this sort of thing. Simple, straightforward text, you can do a deed for a property, you can do very factual-based stuff, but if you've got any kind of emotional content at all, words, it requires a lot of words to communicate that same message. So this is a shorthand, it's a shortcut. It's a very efficient way to communicate this extra message.
And for some people who are listening to this program and have no idea what we're talking about, don't even know what an emoji is, you sort of described it, but
Sure.
how would you describe it to your grandmother who may not have an iPhone?
Well, if you think about the origin of communication, I'm going to go way back, but hieroglyphics, just any kind of pictographic pictures trying to communicate an idea, we evolved past that. We still use pictures to communicate ideas. We use articles will include pictures with the text, but the emoji, it lets you get something that would take a lot of words to describe the same level of nuance. So we know, for instance, a court stenographer takes down the text of a court proceeding. She's getting all the data, but she's missing a lot. And so all of that nonverbal communication has to be transmitted some way if you want it transmitted at all. And emoticons, which evolved into emojis, is our best effort at this so far.
All right, we're talking with Dr. Robert Caudill from UofL Physicians. He's also an associate professor of psychiatry at UofL. When people use these emojis, some people, if I'm texting you, I usually don't use too many emojis. I'll use them occasionally. But there's some people that their whole message is in an emoji, these figures, and you have to figure out what the heck they're trying to tell you.
Right.
So what does it say about those people that use emojis just all the time in all their texts? And what does it say about me or you that may use them occasionally?
Yeah, I think it's about communication style. So people who tend to be very fluent with their words and have the time to commit their thoughts to words probably are going to do that. And then I think some people are more sarcastic than others.
Really? You think so?
It's possible.
Well, that would be me. Maybe I should use them more often. I don't know.
That will keep you out of trouble for certain because it clarifies some things. It prevents people from taking offense. It's protective in some regard, but it also, I think, the nuance that you can capture with a limited amount of time. And Twitter is, of course, ripe for this with the limitations on characters you can use to begin with. So it really does put a value on these.
Are the emojis and emoticons that are used, the smiley face, I assume, is the one that is most used? Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think that's overwhelmingly the most popular one.
Although my son likes to use the poop one, the little poop emoji.
Right.
So
well, and then there's
that all the time.
The wink and the frowny face are probably close behind.
Yeah. When we send emails, I think everyone has run into a situation where you send an email and the person receiving it gets a different message than you meant to send. You either send something that, it may be a little bit critical, but they're taking it as, oh, man, this guy's really knocking me down, or something like that. So is that a way to perhaps, as you put it, fill in the gaps in your messaging when you use an emoji or an emoticon?
Right. So what we want to do is close the gap between what is said and what is heard. And that's what emojis give you an opportunity to do. Email is a little bit fraught with peril because while it seems informal, it's still these days used for a lot. It's basically replaced, written letter correspondence kind of thing. So a lot of business communication takes place in email, yet people feel funny sticking a smiley face into a business email. So you're going to wind up using more words, which is back to where we started,
Yeah. Well, you also said in your notes to me that emojis and emoticons can cut across social lines and racial lines. How so?
Well, I think people do adopt a certain style of communication that words come into vernaculars, there's lingo, there's slang, but a smiley face is a smiley face. I mean, it really doesn't depend on where you grew up for the most part. Most people interpret a smiley face to be something positive and pleasant.
What about the different forms? Let's move on to something else a little bit different. The different forms of social media, like Snapchat, where you take a picture and it's gone in 24 hours or however long it lasts, and those kinds of things. Are there different kinds of social media that say something about the person that's using them or not?
Well, there probably are. I mean, they say you always want to be thirds. Like, for instance, Facebook, which is probably the most popular one now. Many people don't remember, but there were predecessors to this, MySpace and something else. And usually the innovator gets the idea about right, but doesn't get the execution, and the second person picks up a little bit. And the third product, which Facebook turned out to be, seems to be the one that kind of takes over the market. Then you've got folks that just continue to want to innovate, and so things like Snapchat, Twitter, all these other things that kind of followed and built off of it and went off on different directions. There's some thought that being overly committed to social media, like on how many platforms you personally use on a day, may not be a good sign. I mean, at some point it comes at the expense of your connection to the non-wired world. And are you really having any? You can have a lot of friends on the internet, but do you really have any friends?
Well, that's the next thing I was going to ask you. We're talking with Dr. Robert Caudill, Associate Professor of Psychiatry at UofL, and also with UofL Physicians. Do you see any patients, or do you have students who are so committed to social media that their entire lives are wrapped up in social media that they can't hold a conversation like you and I are having right now?
I think we're seeing hints of that. It's new enough that they're not presenting themselves for psychiatric treatment for very often, but my colleagues might very well see them. So I would say that anything that, the finite thing is time. How much time do you have, and how much time do you spend on a social media versus interacting with three-dimensional people? And you can't spend it the same minute twice, so how do you allocate that?
And again, I'm going to go back to my question I asked a minute ago. Like Snapchat, again, that's a real immediate thing, mm-hmm. and it's gone. And again, I think it's 24 hours or whatever.
So you hope. So
you hope it disappears. It's probably out there in the internet Netherlands. But then there's Facebook. When you
mm-hmm.
post something on Facebook, it lasts basically forever.
Right.
So what kind of people, or what's the mindset of people who want to post something on social media, have it immediate, but want it to go away, versus people who, like older folks like me, around Facebook, and would post something that would retain its value and be ongoing and could be seen, 3 years from now?
Right. Well, I think it depends on the amount of thought you put into what the future looks like, I guess. So we spent a lot of time instructing residents on professionalism issues and the sort of thing that a physician would want to have present on social media. And so Facebook is something that's clearly looked at closely because it's easily accessed. Snapchat, I mean, you could be a little riskier if you wanted, I suppose. I wouldn't recommend that.
I wouldn't either, but you could.
But I think that's the way people approach it. They
right.
would put the stuff on Snapchat that they felt is a little bit over the top for Facebook, perhaps.
All right. Any final words on what people should be thinking, or how they should be using emojis and emoticons and social media in general, so they don't get themselves in trouble or don't wrap themselves up too much in it?
Right. Well, I would say if you don't have unlimited amount of time, and I don't know who does, learn to use them to clarify your communications, because they can save you some heartache.
So emojis and emoticons are a good thing.
I think so.
If you use them properly.
Absolutely.
Okay. Parents might disagree at some point, but maybe not.
Well, and then parents have to get their game up to speed, too.
That's true. The parents are probably behind the times. All right. Dr. Robert Caudill from UofL and ULP. Appreciate it very much. Thanks for being on the show.